if I may please. This is when the people called the Moors came out of North Africa and went into the lands that we now call the European countries. There was no European country that they did not touch. I repeat, there was no European country that they did not go into. The Moors, when they came out and invaded these portions of Europe, came out as both a peaceful and an army people. Let me explain that. There is a story about Xisthophanes that's launched 1,000 ships, and it is said to be of Helen of Troy. And it is stated that Paris, the young prince, takes an armada of people to bring her back because of her beauty and his love for her, and because of their love for the young Paris, these people followed him like mad. Well, that is a lot of mythology. What isn't a mythology has become worse than a mythology. It's not even a fairy tale. It's a forgotten page that turned about the history of Europe and the history of Africa. It is when a black princess that lived between the lands there of Morocco and of Libya was kidnapped by a German Teutonic captain, and armadas of men came in search of her, which led finally to an invasion by a very large army of mixed African peoples called the Moors. They were called the Moors because they came from Morocco in the name. The Moors of Morocco. The story of this kidnapped princess is one that has gotten buried in the annals of recent time, but was a story told ably in the 14th, 15th century, and was repeated into the 18th century, but then got lost. The Moors invaded most of Europe in 700 AD. The exact date they give is 705 to 706 AD. However, the Moors stayed in many of these lands for 40 and 50 years and left seeds there in the form of children, and their bloodline still is infused into many of the European peoples. The princess, and I want you to remember this because I doubt that you will hear this story anyplace else, and as in most of the classes that I give that are unique with the subject matter, I suggest you go research it, and if you find it to be a lie, or if you find it cannot be supported, or if you find that it is erroneous, please come back and tell me, because I will be the first one to try and change that part of it if it is so. This is the story of how Europe got its name. How Europe got its name. This princess that was kidnapped was a princess, again, Europa. Because of the love for Europa, and because of the wisdom and beauty of Europa, an entire so-called continent was named. The continent of Europe was named after a black woman. I repeat, the continent of Europe was named after a black woman, the Princess Europa. If you will check very closely into most of not only the Balkan states, but of the states west of the Ural Mountains, and again, you will find that they talk about Air Europa, not Air Europe, Air Europa. They still have European Airlines. And many of the globes and maps, the topographical ones that came out in the 60s and even the early 70s still carried Europe. And in fact, there was a time span when they superimposed the two letters. This went on for about 3 years, and then finally they dropped the A. You will sometimes see it written like this. Then they made a distinct change, dropping the A and changing it to E, and then they took off the A here. And you had Europe, or what once was called Europa. They still have many things throughout Batavia, and as I say, around the area of Austria and so, that are still called Europa, and they still have Air Europa Airlines. All the old maps carried this old spelling, and then when they changed it, the spelling would look like that. Named after a black woman. Win money on that one.
Not sure. Let me go over here. Here? Yeah. Europe, EU. Okay. Oh, you're right. I missed it. EUR. Europe. Europe. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you. Europe and Europa.
With the invasion of many of the areas of Europe, it was a strange invasion. There was some fighting, but it didn't last very long, and it was not because the people being invaded could not have put up a better fight. The Moroccan people that came there had so much more than these people in the form of gold, in the form of the way they dressed, in the form of knowledge. The science of algebra was brought into Europe by the Moors. The great cities of Cordoba and Granada were built in Portugal and Spain by them. The castles of Undar that were in La Bella that are found in Egypt were duplicated in much of the Moorish waste. And in fact, Europe is still draining the so-called Moors of Scotland. These waste areas where there's quicksand and so on like this were named because of their dark areas and because these people came ashore on these lands. They're called the Moors, mass. There are many other things that were done which is easily traceable. Let's do it like this, forget it. In a book called Nature Knows No Color Line, again by J.D. Rogers, there are a set of pictures which I want to share with you. Rogers went over to Europe, and one of the things that is interesting about the Europeans is they believed in coats of arms. Coats of arms was a way that a family crest or a family symbol and the history of that family, what we call now the genealogy, could easily be traced by remembering their first prominent male ancestor. And from that, tracing from that year that that coat of arms was drawn. They each drew up some kind of way that represented a crest or that coat. And then it was usually sealed in wax or was some way or another preserved for time so that these people could understand their most prominent ancestor and the lineage that came after him, and it always was a male. The Moors from Morocco, North Africa, when they came into these lands, because they brought with them a higher culture and way of life, usually were fairly assimilated, and people wanted to be with the Moors. This is very unique because in most cases of invasion, especially, the women resent the men that kill their men, resent the men that come in and take over indigenously and so on and so forth. But they had first come in for a while as traders, and then when this event happened and they actually began to spread throughout the land, there was very little resistance to them. And it's unique, but a true part of history. They come in again about 707, 705, 709, and they continue to go. They usually say 705 and 706, but through that period of time. And they pretty much dominated and took over the governments of these people, or so influenced the education of it that it influenced the government of it. And they adapted the ways of the Moors. They were so enamored of these Moors that they changed whatever their family names were at this time to that showed that they had been influenced by the Moors. And their firstborn from that time on, they were happy to draw and show was of Moorish blood, which meant that then they had the possibility supposedly of being royal, esteemed, educated, intelligent, whatever it would be, traced to what was called the symbology of the Moors. These coats of arms then bear the title of their first Moorish representative in the various lands. So, if you were Italian, and in Italy, again, the name for black was, or dark, was like negron, not negro, negron, which is like N-E-G-R-O-N. Negron was a form of way of saying black. So, and men were sometimes double consonants referred to some way or another a land of darkness or a place where dark pigment people came. So if your name was Negrona, Negroni, Saraceno, Pelongro, Pelogrona, Pellegrini, what are some of the words that they used there? Well, anything along this line, it meant that you had black ancestry or black blood from the line of the Moors. And they usually showed on the coats of arms the first Moor that produced seed in their family. And this was then shown on these coats of arms as their ancestor. If you were German, and I love to pick Germans because of the Hitler influence, where most people think of Aryan supremacy, and therefore through Adolf Hitler they think of blonde hair and blue eyes. Well, Aryan was not a race of people. There were no such things as Aryan or an Aryan race. Again, a misnomer. Aryan, that upper class. A Aryan supremacist, which is a double subject, is simply one who was an upper class of a person or of a neighborhood or of a people. These were the Aryans. Never was Aryan supposed to be a race looking blonde with blue eyes. It meant class, upper class of that hood, of that family, of that particular thing. And it is with the original, in fact, inhabitants of Hamburg, Germany, fled over the Netherlands and were dark-skinned Negroid people. The original Hamburgians were dark-skinned Negroid people. I didn't say African people because, as we will also see, that many of the people, and as we talked about in our first classes, many of the people on earth that are dark-skinned did not originate in Africa in the main necessarily so. As this Negrito, as I told you about, was found everywhere. The word for dark in German, again, was Moor. And also, what's this other word? Schwarz. So if your name was either Moor, which was their way of saying Moor from Morocco, or Schwarz, which meant dark, or dark-hewn, or dark place, then this was their way of saying these dark peoples that had miscegenated into their line. So if your name was Moye, or Monenstecher, or Moningstuch, or Schwarzman, or Schwartz, or Monenpunkt, Strathmore, any of these kind of things, it simply meant a way of saying black, or dark-skinned. It meant that these Germans had black blood. And it's very interesting, one of the best built and strongest men in the world is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he himself will tell you it means Schwarz, black plowman, that his ancestor somewhere was a black man. And that's very interesting too, if you look at some of his features. And he himself admits that's what his name is, black plowman. Many Germans, and I've known many, and one I got very close to, had less prejudice taught to them than we in America had taught to us. They were taught that the first people on earth were black. This was from Kaiser Wilhelm on, from the First and Second Reichstag, really they call it Reich now, or rule, all the way to Hitler. And it was Adolf Hitler, through his Nazi party, which was a very right-wing, ultra-conservative party, that took in more the purists and the fanatics, along with these young men in the colleges and universities who needed something to bandy about, and put together this whole cloak and collage, which Hitler himself didn't believe in, because, of course, Hitler had blonde hair and blue eyes, didn't he? Didn't he?
No.
Oh, didn't he? By the way, that was not his name. Adolf Hitler's real name was Adolf Schicklgruber. Adolf Schicklgruber. He took the name Hitler after his astrologer, when his astrologer died. His astrologer was called Hitler, and he believed very much in astrology and in metaphysics. And he changed his name, Schicklgruber.
Like a shickle and a goober. Which means really one who grabs for the shickles. Money, currency, among some of the ancient so-called, well not ancient, so-called Jewish people. Money grabber, shickle goober. Now, Hitler, of course, was the name of his astrologer. I don't know what Hitler means. If you were English and your name was Blackman, can't be any more expressive than that, can you? Now pronounced Blackman. Or your name was Morrison, son of a Moor. Moorian, child or children of a Moor. And on down the line. Many of the English names simply are based on the Moorish bloodline that went into England through the Moors. If you were French, and your name was Noyer, Morillon, or one of the English, Italian names, Morelli, that's another one, Morelli, any of the Moorish not mentioned, that's the English, French again, Moricund. And a very interesting one, Lenoir, which doesn't sound at all French, but is. The Lenoirs were a very rich, industrial black family in France. And in fact, much of France's industrial might came from the Lenoirs. Now, when you tell France that the reason why they have technology now is because of the Lenoirs and black people coming from North Africa, some will understand it, some will never believe you, but it's all true. Again, like I say, you do research, and I think you'll find it may be true. The same thing with if you're Portuguese, your name was Azambule, or El Carde, or El Morin. It's the same thing again. It's a way of saying black. It's their way of referring to either black by complexion, or from their word for the Moors, or one of the cities that the Moors came from. And they were quite proud. In the book, Nature Knows No Color Line, are page upon page of such scrolls. It even shows here Negroes, again, from ancient Greece, and of course they use the word Negro here, but it shows, again, Malanus, the mother of Delphos, where we get our word melanin. And it shows again the black Greek mother of Delphos, and of course Delphos was one of the tributaries of the gods, or to the gods. And that's where we get our word melanin and Melanesian islands and so on. But to go into some of the coats of arms. Tell me I can't find this because I want it. Okay. Here are some of them. These are some of the ones from Germany, the coats of arms showing the black presence and the names that started in the year that this Moor or so was led to the black lines. And these are European coats of arms, looks like almost a collage of from Africa, if you would. Here's one from, these are overall Germans there. Here's Central European. Here's one, German families again with Negro origin. Moritz is another one. Morowitz, I would say it's Moor. Guter Mores, Moor again, same kind of thing. Here's one, showing the head of this German family, Wolfgang Gunstenstein, Furstoff. Furstoff was another way of saying black too, and one of the more Hellenic overtures. One of other ways you live in the suburbs, you pronounce it much differently. And this one has a cross, or what they call a mitre. This meant that he was a bishop. He'd been given the title of bishop, which meant, and a sword, which meant that he not only gave them spiritual values, but was a strong head of the family line that came from him. You can see all the lesser people that came after this particular one. della Scala. If any of you are opera aficionados, per se, della Scala, Nicodemus. Okay. So it's right here in the book. And when I say to people, if you just start reading just one writer, J. Rogers, you can get a wealth of knowledge. They still go off and buy what everybody else tells them to buy, because for many of the so-called educated Negroes, I call them that, they want to give you the scholars that their clique tells you to read. When I say, let's give deference and respect to a person who starts it first. And this man's books are on file, his bibliography is on file, his footnotes on file, and he says better through pictures, but most of them take a long time to say in most of his books. So why not go to a source that is complete? I feel J. Rogers is a very complete writer, and I'm not taking away from other writers, I just say he's better, because he gets the point across. If you can't read, you can look at the picture. Okay? And again, that comes from his book, Nature Knows No Covenant. When we also look at the whole concept of European history, we find that there are so many cross lines of melanin carrying capacity, or black skin or black blood producing capacity crossing into their family lines, and I want to use about 4 or 5, if you will. We hear about Hannibal, and we hear about Hannibal Hamlin, and we hear about the Hannibal of Carthage that crossed the Alps and came to the back door of Italy. But there was another namesake later. The year that I'm going to, not the one 217 BC, that Hannibal, but the year I'm going to use is 1750. You might want to jot that down. The year is 1750. And a Hannibal, again, called Abraham Hannibal, so you should be able to remember him easily, who was of African blood, or was of black blood, or a person carrying melanin, whichever you best choose, with a Negroid, served as a general in the army in Tsarist Russia, which merely met, like you would say, the pharaohs of Egypt, which I have my confused about that term pharaoh now too, as I do more research. But Tsarist Russia simply meant king Russia, ruler Russia. These were the heads, the Tsars of Russia. This particular Abraham Hannibal had a son through a German white or Caucasoid woman that he married. And their offsprings then were mixed bloods, if you would, but they were all considered to be Russians. Now, they had 5 sons. I'm not interested right now in the history of their sons. I'm interested in the one daughter that they had, who they named a very unique name, which therefore is easily traced. Her name was Nadija, or Nadija, Nadejda. This Nadija, or Nadija, if you would, married a count of Russia by the name of Pushkin, Count Pushkin. They had a son who they named Alexander. Alexander Pushkin became what is known now as the greatest poet, philosopher that Russia has known. He's the one that wrote Eugene Onegin. He's the one that wrote Boris Godunov, so on and so forth. And many people carrying melanin, Negroid people, will not go and see many operas because they feel, well, it's beneath them, or this has nothing to do with their people. This was written by a black man. Okay? Eugene Onegin, Boris Godunov. And within it tells you of the tale of the Moors, especially with Boris Godunov, and it tells you about the succession of kings and so on like that, hidden within this opera. But only discerned, of course, if you understand that he was a black blood man and knew. Now, Nadija and Count Pushkin also had a daughter. And the daughter they named Sophie. She therefore was called Sophie Pushkin. Sophie Pushkin became the Countess of Mernberg, M-E-R-N-B-E-R-G. The Countess of Mernberg was Sophie Pushkin, the daughter of Nadija and Count Pushkin in Tsarist Russia. She married Prince Nicholas of Nassau. Prince Nicholas of Nassau. And when the prince was crowned and became therefore the king again, he He married her, of course, as a prince. She was his wife as a king, and since she did not have status as a queen, she was simply called, again, a consort. This was the word that they used, C-O-N-S-O-R-T, a consort. They had a daughter by the name of Torby, T-O-R-B-Y. This Torby married the Grand Duke Michael of Russia, and Michael was brother to the Tsar, so it went into the highest royalty that Russia had. Michael and Torby had a daughter, and at the insistence of Torby, and they almost broke up their marriage with this because Michael definitely had a name for his daughter, which was not the name that Torby was insisting that her daughter be named, and since it was his daughter, they fell out of love. And it was a long time before this name was finally given, and it was given, and I want you to understand about black pride now, or about something about the uniqueness either in Torby. She wanted her daughter to be named Nadija. That's why it's easily traced in history. She had it named after their ancient ancestor, one of the first in the black bloodline. And therefore, when this Nadija comes up again, almost 2 centuries later, it's easily traceable because the line is then carried on with the unique name of Nadija. This Nadija married Prince George Mountbatten. He was the second Marquis of Milford Haven, a grandson of Queen Victoria of the English royal family, and father of the Marquis of England until the late 1940s, and any bloodline from that, whether they be cousins or what, has black blood there, and now what is called the English royal family. One of Prince George of England's sisters married Tsar Nicholas of Russia, and this made them a Pushkin descendants, also a relative. There's a second interest into the British and French families. Of course, already was in the Russian family. Cuba, C-O-U-B-A, Cornwallis, was a sweetheart for a very long time, and then later on married Admiral Sir William Cornwallis. Admiral Sir William Cornwallis was a brother of Lord Cornwallis, who was the head of the English Admiralty. He was the admiral of the entire English Navy and fleet. She was a black woman, and she later on saved the life of British Lord Nelson when he was attempted to be poisoned.